So today's session is we're going to talk about the customer success tech stack, right? And I know a lot of you are thinking about that. A lot of you are worried about that and making the investment. So we're going to pull back a second, right? We're all in this space. And so we're just going to ask the question overall, is the tech stack for customer success, is it bloated? There's too many choices. We're doing too much, right? There's too many vendors in the space, or is it underinvested? In other words, we haven't done nearly as much as we should, and we're undervalued compared to maybe our peer groups in the organization. So that's the topic. We'll have some Q&A at the end, so make sure you're ready for some questions. I believe I'm giving out swag bucks for like the first question. So, right, all right. Swag bucks. It works. I need some swag bucks, Hunter. All right. Okay, so why don't we do 30-second introductions, and we'll go down the line and basically, who you are, your organization, and where you fit in the tech stack.
Okay.
Mr. Rahul.
Yeah. I'm Rahul Jain. I'm the founder of Pendo, one of the founders of Pendo. We're a product engagement platform. And where we sit in the stack is providing product data to customer success tools. And I ran CS early days for the first 3 years of the company's life.
Hi, I'm Sandy Lin, the CEO and co-founder of Skilljar. Companies use our customer education software to deliver product training, typically for their end users, customers, and partners. And thank you to all our customers, past, present, and future in the audience.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Boyce, the CEO of HireLogic. We are a customer engagement platform. We serve over 3,000 customers, enterprise, SMB, and mid-market in the technology space. Much like Pendo, we connect people, knowledge, and information to make your jobs easier and your customers to connect with each other.
So, some of you are customers of one or more, maybe even all of us, right? We are all peers in this space and we all do different things. So let me just start I'll start right away with the title of the session. What do you think? Do you think the CS tech stack is bloated or undervalued? I'm gonna start with you.
Yeah, I think from a financial standpoint, most CFOs now know to put a line item for a tool for CS. So from a financial standpoint, it's probably invested correctly. I think the problem is it's the ongoing investment. CS is constantly evolving. Your customers are constantly evolving and see operations around it. So you will see, for example, a good example of this is you create a pipeline report, a sales team creates a pipeline report. That's the same thing they do every day, but they have hundreds of sales ops people helping them create that report or things like that. But CS, a customer's lifespan changes, the workflow changes for your CSMs, or even the data you had to integrate across product, other places, Zendesk, other tools that you got to bring in is very complicated, and it's constantly evolving. And I think where people underinvest is CS operations. Having somebody, because if you're part of sales ops as an operations, you're always going to get deprioritized, right? So the underinvestment actually is not in the stack, it's actually in the implementation and operationalizing these tools.
So I'm gonna repeat what you said. So basically the stack itself, you think there's some money for it already in the budget, but what we as a group underinvest in is actually managing the stack, operationalizing that stack, because it's just that much more complicated than sales and marketing.
Correct. And it's like everybody cares about the top line always. Renewal and the customer is always like, yeah, I care about it, but do they really care? Like, it's always like, how much is your pipeline growing? How many logos are you bringing on board, right? Sales always get disproportionate a lot more, and the CS team always is on the bottom of the rung. And at least we talk to a lot of customers as well, because CS is our second biggest persona as well that uses product data. They're always fighting for resources. And I think making sure you allocate, I think when you have that, you're in budget planning, make sure to allocate ops for you, specifically for CS.
All right, so you should stay around for my future of CS session today. We're going to talk about something. Sandy, any thoughts?
So I actually don't come from software. Well, sort of my background's in engineering and economic consulting, and then I was at Amazon for a number of years. So when I first heard about customer success, I was like, is this really a thing? Like, it's so obvious. Like, how is it possible? And so I come at it from a very kind of first principles standpoint, and customer success is massively underinvested, I think, by any measure. we're in DC, so if we took a zero-based budgeting approach by financial return, by efficiency, if you were to wipe the slate clean, and we'll get into why this is, but I think it's massively underinvested from both a strategic budget line item and kind of seat at the table standpoint.
So Sandy, zero-based budgeting is basically every year you have to reevaluate everything you spend all over again. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
And the status quo on budgeting is real. It's very rare that in companies you get brand new functions and brand new people, and so the psychology of quote taking resources from other teams, but if we were to actually wipe the slate clean, how would anybody actually invest in terms of returns on dollars? I think it would look very different than how most companies operate today.
So you're a CEO, you're about to you're doing budgeting now, right? Probably, right?
We're starting budgeting.
You're starting budgeting now, okay. You think your CS team's gonna ask for more or less this year as a percentage of revenue?
Well, we fund our customer success team very generously. So.
Oh, nice. Okay, what's your email address? Email address,
well,
Sandy,
to put numbers on it, it's about the same as sales and marketing combined. So
get out.
Wow.
Look at that. Look at the awes and the
now I think we're actually underinvested on sales and marketing, so it's a different.
Oh, there we go. Now you just pandering.
They're not here.
Okay.
My customer team is here today with Jay and Jeff, so I won't talk about our level of investment. I think here's what I would say. I think it's underutilized because of, Yuman, going back to your point, the nascent part of the market. Sales and marketing is pretty, if you think of the dynamics of it over the years, there's significant data or attributes that are common across multiple industries, but the customer journey is very complex across small, medium, and large, different types of industries. And then you have people on the other end that are working at your customers, and if they're not talented, if they don't understand things, that complicates it. So you have to, I think, understand the customer journey for your segments and then figure out how you use technology and the tech stack to automate that. So I think the CS ops comment of investing is important. You have to know the key activities that create a healthy customer.
So I'm going to pick up on a thread, from the two of you, right? That it sounds like it's maybe custom. Sounds like it's hard, right? It sounds like, you don't do it the same way. And so when I got into the business, one of the things I saw was, best practices were still lagging, right? Best practices were, we were still arguing about what to call CSMs back then. And I think it's changed a lot. But oftentimes tech really explodes when there are consistent ways of doing things and you can actually track to that. Are you seeing that happening, or are you still seeing CS being fairly fragmented, CS, doing things totally differently from one organization to another?
I think on the low end, this whole free movement, right? Everybody has a free trial, free movement, and then people convert. I think that people have a playbook too, right? Because they know they have to onboard automated, they send automated emails. So people are getting better at the automation piece and they're trying to push more there. I think, but at the higher end, when you're dealing with enterprise, I think every customer is different, right? Like you got really tied to business value. There's a lot more handholding. The playbooks, at that point, it's not about playbook, it's about a lot more relationship, making sure you're actually driving value. So I think the companies are getting better at playbooks. There's a lot in the automated space, which is where, a lot of customers, to just get the cost standpoint correct, I think people are pushing, how do we automate a lot more? We have all this technology, how do we sort of tie together to automate the processes, workflows, and things like that?
So I'm going to push back on you on this one. So, and then maybe an enterprise person can come in as well. Enterprise sales, there's a method. It's like saying enterprise sales shouldn't have a methodology as well. They do, right? You got to do A, B, and C. Then you got to get the call. Then you got to get to procurement. And you got to make sure you get all the buy-in. Maybe there's some art to it, but there's a process to it as well. So why isn't there a similar process for, dealing with the enterprise, right? Why can't we, have a playbook for enterprise? Maybe that's not what you're saying, but that's kind of what I heard.
I think enterprise customers look different. Like we have customers like Home Depot, Fidelity on one side, then we have Salesforce on the other side. All their businesses, they're selling hammers to selling software. So I think at the enterprise is very different, but at the low end of the market where you're mostly selling software, they all look the same, right? KPIs are similar. What they're trying to accomplish is similar. The outcome. I think the enterprises, their business models are very different. What drives those businesses are different. Their products are different. So when I'm talking about automation and a lot of the free, the product-led stuff and the free to paid conversions with the SaaS companies or software companies.
I see.
But Marriott looks very different than Home Depot or from an enterprise standpoint.
All right. Any thoughts on repeatability on that?
I think that every customer is a special snowflake, no matter what.
That's why you spend so much on yes.
Maybe it's probably. But that's also why we have 97% retention.
Oh, nice. That's a flex. That's amazing.
Well, so here, I think, philosophically, we tend to lump customer success in the go-to-market organization, but sales and marketing is really a funnel question, right? And so you're really kind of going to your ICP or your least common denominator, and you're willing to accept, say 1 in 4 wins. But actually, from an operational standpoint, I tend to think of CS more like product or engineering, where it's more like a Six Sigma precision of what we're driving for, and every customer is different. Typically, you might be okay winning 1 in 4 sales opportunities, but you better not be winning 1 in 4 renewals, right? And so in order to do that, you need to have a much more diverse playbook depending on the needs of the customer. And yes, the economics at scale matter, but this kind of gets to the question of, well, where's the highest return on your dollar? Is it in acquisition, or is it perhaps, having a more sort of refined playbook for, every customer?
Let me switch gears for a second. We've been thinking. This panel is meant to be like a high level. Think about the stack and where the ecosystem is going. I'm actually going to drill down into some advice because I love to get advice. All right, you guys are all you own. You run a company, you run a department. You make a lot of budget decisions. CS everyone's asking you for more tech, right? I mean, is that fair? Like every day, there's like, hey, there's this new piece of software coming, and this is pretty interesting. What's the best way to actually make the case, right? Like if someone here in your CS team or your marketing team or your sales team wants to put yet another piece of software in the stack, like how do they convince you that it's the right thing to do? So let's get some advice in here. Kevin, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it comes back to just the journey and being able to measure that across your segments. So to the extent that you can identify hundreds of customers that have similarity, you can then use technology to deliver it. There are countless software businesses that make it from 0 to 10 million. 25 million is another clip, 100 million. So how do you lay out how you're going to service that renewal? Cindy's dead on point, which is if you look at your customers and your segmentation, the ops team has to help you talk about what's the motion, what's the cost of those 4 key activities that support that renewal and that lifetime customer. Because if you don't have that customer, the cost of getting new customers is such a challenge, right? If you don't have that customer, you can't sell them new products as you expand. You don't have them to renew, and you don't have them to be a promoter. But I think you have to lead with the data and the segmentation relative to your current market opportunity versus your current customer base, the cost to serve it, and how many people and technology do you need to drive that, right? Because there's a lot of people that do hero work early on. That won't scale long term in a software business.
So it sounds like you're doing a combination of telling a good story, right, as well as backing up with data.
Yeah.
So you like the story as well, like where does
you have to be able to measure how are you getting examples of outcomes into your segments of customers that's their success metrics, right? And if you can do that at scale with one-to-many communities like this, communities like Gain, Grow, Retain, then people are going to see value because it's the convergence of the technology and the know-how and the relationship. So how do you measure each of those?
So Sandy, it sounds like you wipe your budget clean every year, build it back up from scratch. It sounds like, wow, a crazy thing to do. But how do I get a yes out of
Well, to clarify, we don't actually wipe the budget, but coming from a different industry, it just kind of evolved that way without knowing better, so to speak. So it will be interesting what happens this year. As I say, somebody on my team very early on came to me with an idea for something, and she said, this is ROI positive. And I was like, everything we do here is ROI positive. So the question from an executive standpoint isn't whether this is worth doing, it's the limiting factor is actually our soft cost of ability to implement and execute successfully. And so you have to show me why this is, one of the top 3 things that this department or this company needs to do this year, because there's the ability for, the bottleneck is usually RevOps, right? So like you may want to get however many tools you want, but there's a bottleneck of implementation from a system standpoint. So it's like, hey, CS org, if you believe, like realistically, you may only have the opportunity to implement 1 or 2 tools this year. So it's not about whether tool number 4 is by itself useful. I'll agree with it, that's useful. The question is like, where does it stack rank in the priorities in terms of moving the needles, both at least for your department as well as like the company? So that's the question I'm trying to answer.
And so when you rank the priorities, is it something that, it's a departmental, like, hey, CS has these top 3 priorities, or is it measured against a company priority, maybe growth, net revenue retention? Like what's the priority that we should measure against?
I would say right now, realistically, it's department-wide, although I would prefer to do it against the company overall. But I imagine, like many of you, where things change really quickly, and so it's more around kind of reevaluating every quarter, every 6 months. And right now, for us, realistically, the bottleneck is kind of RevOps and the ability to actually implement and do the change management. And so in that kind of roadmap, we have a better sense of, well, what is the stack rank of priorities there?
Okay, so ROI not enough. It's got to be prioritized. Okay, all right. That's good advice.
Or I find also a lot of times the tool proliferation, it's like if it's not on the OKRs, if it's not one of your top priorities, you shouldn't be looking at it.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I mean, one of the lines that I always use is if you automate something, you just get it faster. So if it's a bad process, you just get bad faster, right? So you have to think it, and there's some judgment in it. And again, I think the customer side of it is the reality of there's complexities across it, but the segmentation of current customer base to where you're growing and telling that story. Think about this. You want to do business and you want your partners to be growing with you, right? And so because that's where your future knowledge and experience is going to come from.
No, I think you're absolutely right. Now, how do I get a yes at Pendo?
No, but we're similar to Sandy. Our bottleneck is RevOps. Our RevOps team will say no to everything. Like I can go with it.
They're terrible.
Yeah, they are terrible. They're just overworked and overwhelmed. So what we do, we also have SaaS bloat. Like we have so many SaaS tools for every single thing. Like you can imagine we have a SaaS tool for it, right? So what we've started doing, you got to pull out a SaaS tool to put in a new SaaS tool, and it's about adoption. We go back to, can we implement it successfully, and can we drive adoption? Like, can we do that change management? Because we are hiring 50 people a quarter. We have 800 people worldwide. So to drive that, to put in a new tool is a lot of mental horsepower of that person to change their process and drive adoption. Because what we find out with most tools we put in place, half of it never gets adopted. So driving adoption or minimizing tools, I think is actually what we're trying to do is minimize it and make sure when people come in, they can actually learn that tool and drive value.
I'm going to flip it. I'm going to flip it on you guys, okay? All right. You don't want the tools. What if you were great at actually putting tools in and ripping tools out at high speed, right? And then basically building a stack, consistently improving on it. Like if as CEOs we said, hey, let's be the best, at RevOps, right? Let's be the best at actually trying tools and ripping them out, because guess what? It's actually it is. I think it's what we're seeing in the industry, right? And people are hard to get, right? And so we need to invest in the tech stack. Is that, did I just convince you about anyone? That's the way to go.
I think
it's necessary but not sufficient.
Yeah, the switching costs are so high. Like every time you rip and replace these tools, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So I don't know if I buy that constantly ripping and replacing. You had to have a really good foundation. You had to have a good customer data platform. And most startups are built so fast that their foundation is so shaky. It's like quicksand. So data right. Data integrity is probably the biggest issue in this whole thing. So ripping things in and out is not really helpful.
But even if let's take for granted that tools can magically be implemented, I'm
Yes.
sure as anybody who has tried to say change your QBR, EBR process and train your team, and even in that perfect world, we're still limited by our puny human brains and our ability to like a new QBR, EBR process that's still largely it's nothing to do with tools, but still very hard to kind of roll out properly and really see the impact. And so whether it's that or whether trying to train sales on how to talk about a certain service, like humans, we just gravitate towards the status quo. So even with the perfect tools,
All right, I'm gonna workship that maybe a little more. Okay, I think I got something there, but it's not quite there yet. All right, well let's actually drill down on the data. Okay, so there's the tech stack, and then there's the data. Let's call it the data stack for now. And I actually make a joke that there's probably think about all your data that's in your organization. I bet you there's 16 copies of like the Salesforce data in like every 16 systems. Just kind of floating through, swapping. Getting kind of mangled along the way, right? That big game of telephone between all your SaaS apps. So I know there's you mentioned it a few times here. I guess you have to take care of your data stack before you take care of your tech stack. Is that a fair way to say it? Take care of your data.
I think from a Pendo standpoint, I can tell you early on we should have done that more, right? We should have taken care of the data stack. I think we always put it off and didn't worry about we'll get to it. And we never resourced that. And I think as we scaled, it has become much more of a acute problem that we've sourced now a lot more. And we're a little bit behind on it, but caught up. But it took a lot of human capital and spend. So I do think like these things like getting your data right at the beginning and it's hard because it's constantly evolving and you're trying to pull these data into Looker, into all these other systems that sort of look at tables differently. So I do understand it's hard, but I would invest in it earlier so you can problematize that data much better longer term.
I think that's right. I'm going to ask you a question, Kevin, because you can get it right. Okay, and you can get it right either in the beginning or you can fix it, and then you acquire somebody, and then you acquire someone else. Yeah. So go ahead.
It's pay now or pay later. I mean, when you look at that, if I look at, we recently did an acquisition of one of our competitors, and the first thing that we talked about was the systems plan, the data. We had the people comment around, hey, we're going to get teams working together. We functionally integrated people on day one. But the data and the access and the tools and how are we going to go do that? We were very clear. We're going to study it. We're going to get it done over a period of time, because if we rush it and you make a mistake, then just unwinding it is significant. And so I think when you look at RevOps or IT partnership or an operating CFO, you have to make certain that all your data elements there's a way to change them. There's a true system of record. Where is the customer data that's the gold standard? And then how are you making certain that that's current and it's being updated? Because at the end of the day, that's your lifeblood when you're having conversations with customers. And so think of the different versions of, if you're a SaaS business and you're looking at different ways that people are using it, you have to understand where that is in the evolution of the lifecycle. Because customers that implemented 5 years ago are very different than customers that implemented 6 months ago.
Now, there's a lot of folks here who...
Can I ask a question? I'm a little confused by the question, and that probably means I'm going to be a pay later person. So what's an example of like data issues, and then how does your CS team do their job?
Just the overall fields of like, what's the definition of the product SKU? If you've renamed products, if you've packaged and bundled along the way, what's the data flow there in the system of origin? And then in acquisitions, if they've done the same thing, you could have different SKUs across it. So how do you rationalize it? Like earlier in my career, I went through a 15,000 SKU business. I was on the finance side. It got rationalized down to 2,000. That was a $10 million project. It was super painful. And it was because people didn't pay attention along the way, and you had to unwind 7 years of business consolidation.
Sandy, you buy me a beer, and I will tell you.
I
Elon
can
knows
put you
it.
in touch with a lot of, it's like automation, it's SKU management, it's fields that aren't correct, like people aren't mandatory. AR is not correct, but your gained AR is not right from your net AR because you downsold them. It is a vast mess unless somebody's actually owning it. It is, and I think companies that do it really good early on, it really saves them a lot of time later on. Because
I'm going to blame Salesforce here. Okay, I'm going to blame.
Yeah,
I'm going to blame Salesforce. Oh, okay, Salesforce there. Actually, Salesforce is amazing, but you can do anything in Salesforce. So everyone does something in Salesforce.
Exactly.
Right, and so all of a sudden it's like, okay, we'll create opportunities on the opportunity table, but there's this other table that I can use, and all of a sudden you just go down.
It starts with access rights. Figure out who has access to change data elements.
Okay.
Lock that down early on. A lot of people don't do that.
I love Salesforce, but my goodness, I mean, you can get yourself into a world of hurt. And so when you bring two companies together, and they're doing something one way, and they're doing something a slightly different way, even though both are using Salesforce, that's sort of where that's sort of day zero right there. This is where all the chaos happens.
And I think for CS, it's even like you have off-cycle renewals, you have on-cycle renewals, you have like, if you're upselling products, like we have different modules that we're upselling, that's where all this complication lies, right?
Yeah. All right, okay, I'm all right. We're supposed to get started like a positive. Okay. All right. So the data stack, clearly we have to get the data right. And now it's a lot of work. It feels like it's behind the walls, right? When you're done, like it doesn't feel like a lot has happened, right? You know, sort of like investing in your HVAC, investing in your electricity, and like, you know, your house still looks exactly the same. How do I get you to give me the resources to make that happen? Especially if you're not, you know, let's assume you're not particularly data-driven, or maybe your peers are not data-driven. How do you get the resources for fixing the data?
I think for us, it was like, we couldn't scale the business. So it was pretty easy to get resources. Like, it was just breaking things. We couldn't really report out on things correctly. It was a lot of manual time. We couldn't, so things, when they became acute problems, it got resources really fast. But that's not the right way to do it. So I'm telling you the wrong way to do it. Make it an acute problem, and you'll get resources very fast. When the CEO is frustrated and looks at a report and he goes, I don't know, it might be directionally right, but I'm not positive if these numbers are all right. But directionally, we have this much. You bet the CEO's like, here's a lot of resources, go fix that.
Okay, so basically when it's really broke, you got no choice. Okay, all right, fair enough. All right, so let it break, let it like go get painful. All right, well, let me switch topics a little bit. So, you know, I think in the software space, in the tech space, there's often sort of a ebb and flow, you know, from like lots of tools, right? Everyone's buying lots of little tools that you bring together, and then sometimes you buy the monolithic. Everyone's got to buy the one tool that does it all, right? Sort of a, everyone uses one vendor. For this customer success space, right? If you were to put your future hat on, where do you think our tech stack is going, right? You think there will be a couple of vendors that we'll all buy from, or do you think it'll be proliferated into many, many vendors? Any thoughts on that?
I think the SaaS world in general is moving to kind of best of breed with a common source of truth. And let's just say for now that our favorite tool, Salesforce, is the source of truth for customer records and ARR reporting. I do think there will be, the cost of developing software has gone down significantly, and so that will lead towards better specialized tools by, for specific things. And the example everyone uses is the, 8,000 MarTech vendors out there, but actually, like, if you think about marketing, there's so many disciplines between, within paid, you've still got tools around each channel in paid, like AdWords and LinkedIn and social and in-feed ads. You've got events, you've got, email, you've got like all kinds of sub-optimization things, and that can happen because in the MarTech stack, things are fairly separable and invisible, and you don't need humans after a certain point, but you've still got the source of truth of your marketing automation system typically, or Salesforce. And so I think customer success will be the same way, where there's a source of truth, but then really best of breed around each one. And in Skilljar, we face this a lot actually, because learning is one of those areas where, depending on the ethos of the company, sometimes people say like, well, yeah, you need the same tool for HR and for your customer training, right? And at a certain, like, the common denominator aspects are true, but once you start trying to specialize out, then that's where the differences come through.
So you think it's going to proliferate? Okay, yeah, best of breed, lots of it. Kevin, any thoughts on that?
I think it's going to be a handful, like not just one, because otherwise that's SAP, right? So Salesforce, people feel the same way. I would say about SAP, go back to the ERP days of the 80s, 90s. I think it comes down to a few providers. You need to make certain that you have integration amongst the tools that we're referencing here, because there is always going to be that ability that, how does it integrate? And so working with vendors and partners that keep knowledge unlocked is key, and that gets the exchange of which way they're going. And then ultimately, I think it's how are these businesses going to thrive, and how are they capitalized? Because you want to make certain, if you're putting your infrastructure and your heart and your lungs of your customer experience into it, is it going to be there, right? And so I would say it's, maybe it's 3 to 4 players over the next 10 years.
So 3 to 4 major players,
yeah.
major players that you're going to be choosing from. Okay, so you're the opposite of, okay, got it.
Again, I think all those ones will be out there because they'll be disruptors, but I think that's just the software business, right? Because if you look at the number of software businesses that get acquired, they don't make it to the size of where Pendo is now. They get acquired, right? Just go look at the top 30 software companies, just in the U.S. They fall off quickly, right?
Any thoughts on this, Rahul?
Yeah, I like Sandy's point. There are more specialized tools, I think, at the low end of the market. Like if you're a small company, I think people do specialize, but they don't have the people for product marketing, so they'll use a tool there. I think at the enterprise, what we're seeing is what exactly Datadog and these guys are doing is consolidating on one platform and saying, is 80% good enough? Yeah, I can do APM or something all on one platform, because I think it comes back to who owns the data, right? Is it the event data? Is it customer data? And building off of that one platform is just easier for, I'm talking about large enterprises like Home Depot, folks like that. They're just like, we can't deal with this shadow IT stuff all over the place. So they are consolidating, but I think on the low end of the market or mid-market, I think people are going to continue to buy tools because they can't hire people fast enough. And I do agree with Sandy, you'll see more specialized tools in that place. And then at the enterprise, you're going to see a platform where people are 70% is good enough.
Okay, so best of breed, more vendors for smaller companies. And as you sort of mature on enterprise, you're going to choose fewer vendors. Let me ask the audience one question, raise of hands, because I think there's an externality that's going to affect this, and that is all the security and data issues that we're running into. Like that's really putting a lot of fear into not only the RevOps people, but the CXOs. And so like you get a new vendor in, and they got to go through a security review. They got to do this thing. They got to GDPR, blah, blah. Okay, are you finding that, for those of you who in the audience, is security and data making it more difficult for you to add on a new vendor, or is it not making a difference? So is it making it more difficult? Who's making it more difficult? Okay, all right, and then where's it not really making a difference yet? Okay, so probably about 2/3 of you are saying it's hasn't made a difference yet, and 1/3 is saying it's making more of a difference. That's interesting. Okay.
So,
how many of those businesses, show of hands, are above $100 million in revenue?
So who's raised their hand is 100 above? Okay.
Above
right,
50 million.
Yeah. Above 50 million. Yeah. And Europe is making a difference as well. Absolutely.
So here's the thing, though. I think we need to be thinking bigger, because let's take AWS. When AWS came on the scene, it wasn't like, oh, is this going to be the only cloud's thing? Like, how many different types of businesses were built on top of this paradigm shift to the cloud? And in my opinion, customer success is as big of a movement, and there's going to be new types of vendors and tools that we can't even contemplate today with that type of mindset. So for me, the question is like, how fast will customer success accelerate? Because to the question of underinvested or bloated, who benefits from underinvesting customer success? Investors. And that's pretty much it, right? Now, who benefits from over-investing in customer success? The entire ecosystem of the company and the business. And so why not over? And actually, your long-term revenue is actually better. And so, now net dollar retention is like the thing. And so to me, the questions were like, how fast is that mindset going to be adopted? And where we're not thinking, what does it take to steal budget or get budget, but where the customer is truly the center of the business. And whether that happens in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, we can debate. But I think as that shift happens, we're going to see all types of new tools and vendors. And it's not just adding, onesie twosies to your, general bloated tech stack, but how do we completely refactor how companies operate with the customer at the center?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Well, now let me ask one more question, and then we'll take it to the audience for questions. So right now it seems like it's a real boom time in investing, right? The folks, all of us on this stage has benefit from it, but there are really thousands of companies being started in SaaS and probably in CS as well. How do you think that's going to go? Like, do you see competition every day, or is it just is it a good thing, right? Like, or some .com boom. I lived through the .com boom. It wasn't so great. It was great for actually about a year, and then it was horrible. What do you think about what's happening with the investment in the space?
I think it's always good. It keeps companies like us on our heels and continuously innovating. What happens when you become bigger is you got tech debt everywhere, right? You sort of can't innovate fast enough. So these younger companies coming up give us inorganic opportunities. They make us better at the end of the day. They make us think better in what we need to build next, what really matters to our customers. So I think the proliferation of companies are good, right? Economically, for software generally. I think it just becomes harder as you become bigger to innovate because you just do have so many customers to support. You have tech debt, you got to re-platform things. You just can't innovate. So these younger companies will take advantage of that, right? They will see gaps. It's what Snowflake did to, Redshift. They saw a gap, they took advantage of it. So I think constantly companies will see gaps in the market and take advantage of it.
Any thoughts on the investment? You guys welcome it as well?
I think, the competition is I agree with Rahul's point. I think that's the reality. The key, though, is then you got to go back and figure out, okay, how many of those companies actually get to scale for the very reasons that you just said? And that's the challenge. Right? So if you're trying to build that business and get to a certain point, you have to say, okay, like what's that level of investment to get to here? Because if you're over-investing in something that isn't as big of a market opportunity, you're just going to raise capital. I mean, there are countless businesses that have raised too much capital, and they don't ever get the return back. And so I think it's, you're seeing more businesses now defer on funding and then going in at larger valuations to go after that. But I think it's the natural consolidation in any business that ends up happening.
Any thoughts, Andy, on the money?
Companies die from indigestion, not starvation. And if anyone's heard that phrase, where very few companies actually die because of their competitors. They typically, self-sabotage into the scenario. And with the capital markets today, and where interest rates are what they are, like in some sectors of the economy, we're actually creating artificial scarcity just to transact with each other, whether that's crypto or other things, right? So I think the infusion of capital and customer success is a terrific thing. However, and partially this is because of the nature of my business, I don't think enough attention and investment is being paid to the people side of the equation. So you might have okay, your data can be all messed up, but presumably if you've hired the right people and empowered them to take care of the customer, they will still figure out how to do that. And so we can calculate health scores however we want. We can clean up our data however we want. That's still very internal facing. And so, what I think as an industry and where Skilljar plays and technology cannot kind of by itself push forward the customer success movement, it still comes down to people being properly enabled to use their tools to the extent possible and to take care of the customer.
Right now, it's still like the face to your customer is a human face for most part, right? So, all right. Well, let's any questions in the crowd? Remember, there's skill. There we go. Got some swag bucks for you. Okay.
Excellent. So I actually have a very specific question for Sandy. So you mentioned at the way beginning that you felt your CS organization was very well or overinvested even, which I think picked all our ears up. So I want to ask you to highlight some of the journey to get there. More specifically, I'm assuming your CS organization was getting invested at probably the sacrifice of other teams. So what were some of the conversations you had, for example, if your head of engineering or marketing team said, hey, I asked for these resources, why is the CS organization getting so much more than us? What are some of the conversations that you had were probably pretty tough to not only explain why we're investing it, but also how they could benefit from that?
All right, so the question is, how did we get to a place where the company is, I think, relatively more invested in customer success than normal? And what are those discussions like with other teams? So I think I didn't know better at the beginning of this company, right? I come from a product management background, and so product management is always about under promising and over delivering, and to some extent doing what you say you will. Like when a customer is disappointed and it's our fault, because I take that very, very seriously. And it's a bit of just like, do what you say you will. And so the alignment around product, customer success, and part of the reason why maybe we're not the best in sales and marketing yet is like, we're just like, all of that I think is very aligned around truth. As the founder, right, we didn't really have salespeople for many years. It was mostly myself, and we had, I didn't even understand what customer success was, really, honestly, for the first 2 years of the company, but somebody's got to be taking care of the customer. It's just like, it was a very obvious thing for me. And again, coming from Amazon, right, for the most part, it was not a sales and marketing like emphasis business. It was all customer. And so that was just a little bit of the mindset that I had. And in a consumer mindset, you know, you churn out of Nordstrom every time you walk out of the door, right? And so it's a different sort of relationship and around the promise. And I would say, like, we don't have those conversations yet between different departments. I'm like kind of getting nervous with like this data pay later. I'm like, what? And I think like I don't know. It's. I think what customer focus is one of our values, but it's too much in our DNA where, you know, the customers pay the bills. And as also a little bit of context, right? I'm based in Seattle. A lot of Seattle companies really kind of self-fund. Yes, we raised outside capital, but we have never had to, and so the customer relationship in terms of survival as a business, I think, has been a little bit more at the forefront of everybody's mind versus, say, like a Bay Area company. And so I don't think any executive on my team would last very long if they were not customer oriented first. And we haven't had severe budget conversations because our customer gross and net dollar retention show the payoff from what we've been doing. So not to say that those conversations are not going to come, but it's more in the lens of what is the best thing for the business as measured by what's the best thing for customers.
So day one, basically, you were customer focused. So it's hard to replicate that, right? And I would argue that now, you know, for those of you who are finding problems getting the investment you need for CS, like I think we'll talk a lot today about like the tide has changed, right? Even in the last 12 months, the tide has changed for everybody in this room because, you know, for the rise of net revenue retention, the rise of customer success, like, you know, I think we'll definitely talk more about that. But I mean, sometimes you just get lucky and you get someone like Sandy who's customer focused from day one, and sometimes you don't, right? And so you have to advocate for yourself. So I think there'll be lots of talk today about how to advocate for that.
I will say I think incentives are completely set up. The more I learn over the years, the more I see why customer success has challenges, right? From the way GAAP financials are done to the status quo on who holds the budget. Like But for me, at least at Skilljar, these were like new concepts, and I was like, whoa, that's weird. And even the metrics, right? Sales can understand how they optimize. Every person in sales, whether you're an SDR or an account executive or a demand gen person, can understand their specific metric and how they move the needle and how that ties to the big picture. LTV and gross retention and net retention, they're much more amorphous concepts. And really, at the end of the day, I think the people that should care are the CEO and the CFO, but it's not as actionable. So the human interests are also kind of not necessarily aligned with the right thing for the business long term.
All right. The questions for, yes, go ahead. We'll go over here in a sec.
Thank you.
Everyone's
So
having
for a relatively new CS group, what would you say an ideal tech stack would look like? And not by like company name, but just by like product type?
So I ran CS early on. I think having a system of record, something that you can manage your workflow tools, like basically something like ChurnZero, right? Just having that central, or something like Gains, whatever you want. Put anybody, Blank to Tango, anybody in that spot. But I do think the other key things are, you got to have a source of truth if you're a product business on the product data, right? The event data coming out of your product, be it you can use Mixpanel, you can use Segment, you can use Pendo, you can use somebody to get that data out. I think it's really important. And then the other thing is having a support ticket. I think those three things you need day one, like a Zendesk, Freshworks, somebody like that. Product data if you're in that business, and then a success CRM. Everybody sort of has HubSpot or something like that, just generally, but more specifically for the workflows.
Sapphire Ventures has a great ebook. I think it came out, 3 months ago, with the customer success tech stack and the maturity curve. So it tracks from like kind of one-on-one email, shared inbox, to like support knowledge bank, to like a full-blown tech stack is, I would say, community, training, digital adoption platform, in terms of at least the customer-facing layer.
There's always an easy way, is like where the repetitivity, like where you're wasting your time, like doing things over and over again, or where chaos starts to happen, right? Like for instance, we invested in LMS, right? When it was like, okay, our CSMs are just training like 3 hours a day, right? Like 3 hours a day is just crazy, and so let's do that. And then, oh, by the way, our customers are asking us, so much for best practices, so let's get a community in there. So sometimes you just follow the pain, but there are oftentimes people ahead of you who've done it a few times. So yeah, that's great. Sounds like a great resource.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, at the beginning we just used Salesforce and a Kanban board. Literally put customers up and move them through for our first 100 customers. That's how we did it. Right?
Until it was terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say the key also is when you look at those tools is what are the key activities that have to happen, right? So how do you know they're happening? It's about inspection to scale, right? So how's it happening, and how is the quality of that interaction being measured? And then how are you talking about that and segmenting that? So to me, that's the key of growing and retaining and being able to sell back into your customer base.
All right, let's get a question from the north side over here. All right, with the scarf. I believe that's the north side. I'm just guessing.
Hi there. Thank you so much for this highly, highly relevant conversation. Along the lines of tying all of this together, we all have a variety of systems, whether it's ChurnZero and HubSpot and Salesforce and Pendo and HireLogic and Skilljar. How do we tie all of these systems together to get a clear view of the user, the actual customer or individual? Sandy, you started to talk about we don't know what future systems are going to exist in the CS world. But for today, given the systems that we have, how do we make them all work together? And what's your perspective on a customer data platform?
I'm going to let you guys answer the question.
That's an entirely different.
And customer data platform, you mean like a Segment or one of those guys? Is that what you're talking about? Okay. You guys want?
Okay, next question.
That's at the Hamilton from 9 to 11.
Yeah, it is.
It's a long answer.
Yeah, it's a long, interconnecting these things are really hard. Just honestly, they are. But what we've done is made sure we have engineering resources or ops resources dedicated to integrating these things. So what we do with Pendo data, we push it into Salesforce and into ChurnZero, right? We push our Zendesk tickets all into Salesforce. We've tried to push almost everything into Salesforce and then use that centrally to pull out, because Salesforce does have good APIs and easy ways to pull things in. And also you can do batch updates. You can do a lot of stuff that's easy for Salesforce, and then other people can pull off of it, right? That's what we've done, and that creates a data mess. When you have all these things all coming into one place, that creates a little bit of a mess. But if you have somebody who controls it, and I think walking through what we do every year, we do something, we go zero out our customer journey, because our customer journey changes. We have new features, new functionality. So we go back and go to our customer journey and maturity every year, basically. At the beginning of the year, we go through, what does that narrative look like? What's that maturity look like? What features do they need to be adopting? And how do they move through that? And then we map those things with data behind them.
The one thing I would say to you is be careful chasing the Holy Grail, right? Do you really need it? Is it okay that, maybe the dashboard is populated by 3 different systems rather than, a magical system that knows it all? Just be careful chasing that, right? Because you may be able to say, all right, look, I'll get a good view of the customer without, yet a pretty painful, the tactic of actually bringing all your customer data is really, really hard. So do you really need that, right? Can you, imagine everyone's dashboard ends up in Excel at some point, right? It's like everything just kind of lands in Excel all of a sudden. And maybe that's good enough, right, for now. And, as you get the resources, you chase that Holy Grail. By the way, you'll never get there. Okay, sorry. But, just make sure, right, you're doing things that are good for the business, right, without over-engineering. Because you can over-engineer, right, the data stack. Yes, ma'am. Over there. And I'll do you with the ponytail. Yeah, you've raised your hand a few times. Yeah. Sorry.
So I'm not a people leader, but an aspiring change leader at my company. So one thing I think we're going to struggle with, so we're getting ChurnZero. Woo, super excited. But our company, we're not startup anymore, but I fear that our Salesforce data is trash, and we have our sales operations manager is our Salesforce admin. So I don't know, we'll be able to say, hey, Tom, can we spend a month to go through and why is this field here and what's that there? So what's some advice, or I guess, what's a reasonable ask of our chiefs or our bosses to say, hey, can we get someone to spend a month to go through Salesforce and make a definition sheet and get things out of here that don't need to? Or how do we ask, hey, I can't have customers for 3 months until this is clean, or what?
Right,
what do you guys recommend?
How big's your company? 100 people?
Hello? Oh. So yeah, our employees are 200, up to 200 now.
200. And how many admins do you have in the company? Sales administration, rev ops people, sales ops people?
Just one.
Just one? Okay.
Underinvested. I think I would just say that the example of what has happened because the data is bad, i.e. we lost this customer, we didn't get this deal. It has to link to growth. I mean, this is why sales and marketing tools were funded. But the reality of it is getting a comparison to an outside, we are behind other businesses our size, and here is the evidence. You got to make an external comparison, I think, to a C-level person.
I think, a lot of C-level people are open to benchmarking, right? Benchmarking is really where you can kind of get me, right? Best companies do this. Oh God, I want to be a best company. I guess I better, get 3 ops people. But it really does. It really does work, right? Ops is a big part of how SaaS companies become great. and let's try to find some benchmark. That's what I would do, right? And oh, by the way, if you ever say the words, "I'm going to shut down sales for 3 months" to a CEO, like you're going to lose you're going to change nothing, right? I know you were kidding there, but I think benchmarking is a big thing. What do you guys think? Like how, if you were underinvested, or maybe let's say you're on a board, right, somewhere, and you realize that there's a 200-person company you're the board of a company and they have one ops person in general. How would you try to convince the CEO as a board member to step it up?
There's actually a lot of great Salesforce consulting shops. I don't know if you're a member of Modern Sales Pros, there was actually a thread like last week with 5 or 6 really solid outside shops, especially for like field changes and opportunity layouts. We've used a great group called Kicksaw before for the more like transactional type things. And there's lots of, because like from the CEO perspective, it's like, yeah, I want better data, but how are you going to get there? And the answer, like headcount actually isn't a solution because like, it's so hard to hire people, then you got to train that person. And now we're like 6 months later and nothing's been done, right? And so, especially in Salesforce, there's a lot of external resources that can be brought in to implement things. But it's also like, I don't know, I'm realizing now this conversation of like, wow, like what am I setting myself up for? But I also realize like there's 2 things. One is we only implemented Salesforce maybe like 2 years ago. And so there's like probably like that effort of getting everything clean probably is fairly recent at least. And then I also realize, which I think I knew, I have a very, very low tolerance for operational mess. And I think my CS leader is very much the same way, but yeah, so that probably doesn't help.
Well, the one thing about SaaS that I think is true is it's become more of a machine than you would and maybe it's not people, but it's dollars, right? Yeah. So, X number of new sales reps bring, X, Y dollars each. Then they go through the system, they need this many BDRs, then it translates to this many CS. And once you hit like 10 AEs, you need a new operations person, an enablement person. And your algorithm will vary, but it's like at some point it's actually kind of just a machine, right? So you just have to convince, like, we've crossed that threshold of 200 people where we need to invest X number of dollars. And so just let's find that benchmark. All right, one more question and then we'll end it. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Thinking about it the other way, not necessarily the tools that are out there for CS to invest in to do our jobs, but how about the companies that are actually using these tools, right? And so initially I think about, well, I actually think it's quite bloated because everybody thinks that they need another tool to do something else better. Mm-hmm. And we work really hard to try to pare that down because tools get forgotten about. And I find that if a CS person has to go into 5 different tools to do their job, they're probably going to forget about 3 of them, focus on 2 of them, and then my data is also now bad because we're either not getting customer notes in a place or we're not getting something else somewhere else. So I'd love to hear the panel's thoughts on, I think there's a healthy balance, but I also really believe in more is not always better in this type of scenario because you're asking a lot of your CS team when really they should just be focusing on customer engagement. So we're really trying to narrow it down to like 2 things with some extra cherries on top to help. But I'd love to get, again, your opinion on really trying to narrow down and get rid of the bloat of how many tools that you have internally to actually get your job done.
Well, I think it goes to what Rahul was saying, which is if you start measuring utilization, right, relative to the tools, but it gets to what is the simple motion. So there's selling, there's customer, the motion that has to happen. Someone physically has to do something. The mistake is, you were saying this, like tech for tech's sake, like what's the goal you're trying to achieve, the outcome or the risk you're trying to prevent from happening? How do you make certain that how you're measuring, is it happening and what's the quality? And I would use as few tools as possible to do that. There's a lot of other things. We use Gong to listen to our customer calls, to our sales calls. So you can say, are people actually delivering the playbook for customer success the way that it was designed? A lot of businesses in this room, just from a show of hands, are smaller. And there's that evolution of businesses saying, oh, yes, but I have to do this. Like people do the same, people do multiple jobs, right? So it's a snowflake customer experience. How do you create the customer experience that's personalized but scalable?
Also, I would say, think about the tools you have to use and the tools that your folks like to use,
That's a good
right?
one.
I mean, I think those are two, like sometimes you have to use a tool, like I'm going to pick on Salesforce again. So you got to use Salesforce, right? In fact, I remember when my first company, like people were not using Salesforce, like, all right, 5% of your commission is taken out unless you pass like the Salesforce entry test, right? And then we'll give it to you. And guess what? Salesforce, you know, like, because like there's some tools you just have to use as the system of record or whatnot. So think about those tools that you have to use because they play a role upstream, right? Or managing the business. And then the ones they like to use, and those in the middle, those are the ones that maybe are on the chopping block. Maybe
I would still like encourage a mindset shift here because I don't think any marketing or sales leader would be having this conversation. And part of it's like we hold the biggest book of business for the company.
Mm-hmm.
We hold the biggest revenue for the company. We hold our brand for the company. We hold advocacy for the company. And so part of it's like we're not here just to like pick up the crumbs of whatever sales and marketing leaves behind. Like if the CS team, this probably not help changing the culture of your company if that's the issue, but if the CS team is in 5 different tools, like things are not done until they're in Salesforce or whatever the CSMs are in every moment of every day, just like a marketing project is not done until it's synced with Marketo or HubSpot or whatever you're using, and a sales project is not done. And so like, I think, you know, I wouldn't give up on like, oh, we're just gonna have more, we have to reduce our tools because there's too many and they're not all in Salesforce. No, it's actually like, how do we actually change the mindset so that customer success has what they need to be successful, full stop. Like,
I'm going to end there. Thank you, Sandy. That's fantastic. Thank you, Sandy, Kevin, Raul. Thank you all. And it's time for a quick break. So we'll see you the next session.